Hi, everyone. I'm back with a Season 3, Episode 1 review of The Wheel of Time on Prime. Let's get right into it. This is Unraveling the Pattern. I'm Lauren. I can't wait to talk about this episode. I'm going to be reviewing each episode, and I know that I released a full season review, and so I've seen the entire season. I don't want people to freak out. I'm only going to give my initial reactions and responses that I wrote down when I very first watched the episode. I'm not going to spoil any future episodes, so calm down. That being said, this is kind of more of a spoilery book reader review. I'm just mostly going to run through the things that I loved, the things that maybe disappointed me or confused me, and talk about the things that excited me, which is really the point of this. So as a book reader and book geek, I'm going to be talking about things that I noticed that are either Easter eggs or things that excited me. So I can't promise that this will be 100% spoiler free. That being said, as always, if you're concerned about spoilers, you can look in the description down below and I'll give a very detailed spoiler warning that will help you. So with that said, let's talk about the good. This episode was jam-packed with so much action, so many amazing things. I really like this episode. I'd put this right up there at the top of my favorite episodes of the show up to this point. Just incredible TV. It wasn't perfect, but I really liked it. I loved the acting. I loved how much lore there was. I mean, one of my favorite things is when the show gets the lore accurate. They talk about Kalendor, they talk about the Stone of Tyr, they talk about Sa'angreal, all kinds of amazing things in the 13th Depository. We saw the redstone door frame. All of these things just excite me so much. So I love that element of it. It didn't feel to me to be overly exposition heavy, and yet it just really worked for me. So I'm going to just go through my list here to really talk about all of these things, and I'll just kind of ad lib as I go. So if you see me looking over like this to look at my list, that's why. Let's just run down this list. That image of Rand and Ishamael in the clouds, I loved seeing that. What a great nod to book readers, but also so cool to see how the news is spreading. I really enjoyed that. I loved how Elaine in this episode was such a diplomat, how she was supporting Avienda and sort of defending Avienda to the others while also defending Rand to Avienda and things like that. That really worked for me. This episode isn't going to please book purists. Obviously, none of these will. But I really like how they aligned everything. I've seen some people complain about why are they in Tarvalon? Some of these characters never go to Tarvalon. And my understanding of that is, well, for show reasons, there's a lot of reasons, which I'll talk about in my Unraveling video. But from a practical standpoint, it's also just, this is a set that they've built. Why wouldn't they use this set? It's kind of a home base. It makes sense that they would all regroup there before they depart. And so I don't have a problem with it. And I've been to that set. It's beautiful. It deserves to be shown. So to me, that's just a good practical reason. Is it accurate to the books? No, but it works for me. It's not a big deal. Egwene's accepted test was another highlight of this episode for me. Seeing Rand insane was really amazing. The Black Aja fight, the VFX, man, they really enhanced the VFX. Lan's sword is another one. We got to see his Malkyrie sword. I'm not sure if the show is changing lore related to power wrought blades, or if this is kind of like something that Lan and Moraine think is something that can kill a Forsaken. I was thinking, oh, okay, well, so in the show, power wrought blades can kill Forsaken, fine. But the truth is, Moraine stabbed Lanfear through the heart with Lan's Heron-marked blade in season 2, and it did not kill her. So is it maybe something to do with a power wrought blade, or the fact that Rand channeled some sort of weave into the blade? Also, alternatively, is Ishamael actually dead? There's always that possibility that he's not really dead. But anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. I know I'm just rambling, but that's what I do with these reviews. A couple other good things in this episode that I remembered and had to record some extra stuff. Lan giving the ring to Nynaeve. I loved that little beat. And I need to also talk about specifically the cards coming to life. I was actually kind of disappointed that the cards came to life, but didn't fight Matt. They just kind of distracted him. That was kind of disappointing to me. But I also loved how it looked, the way they came to life. And I love the little Easter egg that they were basically Hero of the Horn themed cards. And there was even like the icon of the horn from the books on the back of the cards. And we got a little glimpse of Uno, some other things. That was all really fun to me. I'll talk a lot more about Easter eggs and specific things in my Unraveled video. Hey everyone, this is post-production Lauren jumping in to say, I can't believe I forgot to talk about Elaine and Avienda. Now, obviously this is one of the more controversial choices of episode 1, and I've seen a lot of complaints about it, mostly from trolls, but I have to say, I really like that. I think it's a really smart choice for the show. For people who don't like it, think about Rand's relationship with Elaine in the books compared to Elaine's relationship with Avienda in the books. Avienda and Elaine have a much better, stronger relationship. And the showrunner has said Avienda and Elaine's relationship was really important to him growing up as a queer individual. So anyway, it doesn't bother me. I recognize why it's controversial, but to me, it actually makes more sense in the long term to have them be an item and then maybe bring Rand into it in some way later. So that's my thoughts about that. Let's get back to my pre-recorded video. All in all, this episode, action-packed. I loved it. Everything was improved. The cinematography, the acting, the VFX, all of it was just so improved. There were some very minor gripes I had, but they were so minor. So let's get into a new section for my reviews that I'm calling the bad and the confusing. I don't know that there was much. Really, there wasn't a lot of bad in this episode, and I know I sound like a broken record, but you're just going to have to get used to it. I like the show. Sorry, people who don't like it. I don't look at the show and go, ugh, all this stuff has changed from the books. I just don't do that. I like it, and I really loved this episode. It was, like I said, probably one of my top episodes of the show so far. That being said, the one thing that was a little hokey for me was Alana and her warders in the streets fighting against the Black Asha. It felt a little over the top. One of the issues that the show has is they never really are clear on power levels. And it seems like sometimes the Aes Sedai are overpowered, sometimes they're underpowered. It's just more for plot convenience rather than being consistent. And Robert Jordan was very consistent with these things. Well, for the most part. Book 1 is a little weird, but you get my point. Anyway, that was a little hokey, but I read somewhere that it's possible that some of those sort of like ninja moves that Alana did in the streets might have been sort of a nod to her Bollywood audience, and that actually made me like that scene more. Also, I did think it was very emotionally resonant when Ivan was killed. I thought that scene was really well done, so I wouldn't call that bad. Another one of my disappointments is when Swan kind of admitted that she just made mistakes in Kyrian in season 2. That bummed me out a little bit because I was a big fan of the ruse theory. Now, it's still possible that something was going on there, but it feels like this episode kind of confirmed that Swan really did just turn against Moraine in Kyrian. There's a part of me that thinks, well, maybe there was compulsion involved. It just still feels weird to me that Swan seemed to do a 180 and turn on Moraine in the end. They'd both been working so hard to prepare the world for the dragon, to find the dragon. And even earlier in the episode, the way Swan was like, I'm going to take this burden on for you. You don't have to do this anymore. It felt very loving and accepting. And then all of a sudden she turns around, tries to cage Rand. It just felt very like Forsaken influence. And then the fact that Lanfear said a broken Amerlin is better than a dead one. I don't know. It just felt like manipulation to me by someone like Lanfear using compulsion. Now, the ruse theory, for those of you who don't know, the ruse theory is basically this idea that Moraine and Swan were kind of tricking everyone, and that the show was tricking the audience, and that they had a deeper plan there, and that they all just had to kind of pretend that Swan wasn't letting Moraine get away with Rand. But then that kind of gets broken when you realize that Swan showed up and commanded Moraine with that oath that she made to close the Waygate. And that doesn't really fit in because that doesn't feel like part of their plan. And so my version of the ruse theory is that, yes, they were planning all these things behind the scenes, but they didn't anticipate that Lanfear would show up. And Lanfear is the one who threw the wrench in everything and caused some sort of upheaval there. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. In this episode, Swan seems to kind of imply that all the choices she made were hers. But I don't know. People who are under compulsion in the show, do they know they're under compulsion? Compulsion is one of those things that still needs to be explored in the show. And we've seen a little bit of that with Naomi in this episode. I don't know if Naomi is using compulsion or some sort of brainwashing thing or what happened exactly to Adelius. But anyway, that's all very intriguing to me. So as far as like speculation and theories go, I'm still hopeful that we learn more about what went on with Swan and Moraine in Kyrian. But I'm starting to lose hope that that theory is accurate. And people who don't believe that theory are probably right, that what we saw is what we got. And Swan and Moraine just had a falling out because they had different ideas about what to do with the dragon. And if that's the case, I'm willing to live with that. But anyway, that's kind of my side note about all of that. My complaint, I sound like a broken record, but my main complaint all the time is they just need more time. They need more episodes. And if they had all that, I think the show in general would be better. But you know what? I couldn't really ask for more in this episode. So much good happened. Let's now get into the great and the surprising. I know some people are sort of on the fence about the body horror stuff in the show. And I know when you're reading the books, you can almost overlook just how sometimes terrifying some of the villains are and the shadow spawn and things. But this is one of my favorite things about the show. It can be over the top and sometimes too violent for people. But for me, the scene with Mogideon creating the Gray Man was so cool. The whole Great Gray Man sequence before that, too, I loved. What we call the bubbles of evil as book fans, the way that they handled that in the show really worked for me. It was different. It wasn't the kind of hokey concept of the bubbles of evil. It was more about Lanfear and Moraine sort of working together to try to divide the group. I thought that was actually really well handled. And the way that they sort of tricked the audience into thinking that the Gray Man was somehow involved with all of that, when in reality that was a separate attack from Mogideon. I loved that. But most importantly, the thing that really stood out to me the most in this episode was the scene of the Gray Man being created. That was just so creepy, so well done. And once again, I say it every time, but one of the things the show does better than the books is make the Forsaken scarier and more interesting. And that absolutely did that for me. So I really love that. Another thing that was just so great to me was hearing Matt speak the old tongue, almost like he didn't even realize he was doing it. I love that. And by far, my favorite thing from the episode, because I'm one of those people who wants this so badly in the show, was the nods to the Snakes and Foxes. There was the board game, the Snakes and Foxes board game, and then there was also the Redstone door frame. My feeling is this is like Chekhov's gun. If you know that literary concept, if there's a gun on the mantle in the first act, it's going to be used in the third act. And that's how I feel about the Redstone door frames. It's there in the first act. If they don't use it, that would be such a cruel thing for them to do to us as book fans. So I'm really still holding out hope. I know season 2, I kept holding out hope that they would give us that flicker sequence, which I talked a lot about. We didn't really get it. But you know, I'm holding out hope that we get Snakes and Foxes, because that's just my favorite part of the books. Well, one of my favorite parts. So anyway, I know that this was kind of rambly, especially for episode 1. I have more detailed lists for some of the other episodes, but I wanted to get this out there. I'd probably rate this episode probably an 8.5 or 9 out of 10. I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was a stellar episode, an amazing season opener, very strong. I think it's going to pull in new viewers. I mean, I think it's doing everything it needs to do for the show to thrive. And so all around a great episode. I hope you enjoyed this review. I know it was a bit rambly. My future reviews will probably be a little bit more orderly, but anyway, remember to like and subscribe. And more importantly, please watch my more quality videos. This is just me sitting in front of a camera, which isn't something I do much. My quality videos, like my Unraveled videos, are more important to me, my recaps. So please watch those. And until next time, let the dragon ride again on the winds of Prime.